Thanks for tuning in to Advanced TV Herstory. We've been connecting the dots between feminism and TV to politics and culture for more than 5 years. Scroll back through the archives at Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, or our website, tvherstory.com. Thanks for listening. Welcome.
Welcome, listeners. Hey, you know what? This is another Summer of COVID episode where we embrace the life and the viewing that we never would have had without all the shades of lockdown we've experienced in these last 4 months. I know I've watched my fair share of TV, and I'm sure you have too. An important silver lining, however, has been that the world has slowed down a bit. That might be one of the reasons why our guest today has the time to stop her schedule and visit with us. Australia's Jessica de Gouw, who I understand is now currently in London participating in this call with us, has been a TV force for the last 6 years, nonstop. But if you're an American listener, I'm kind of guessing you maybe wouldn't necessarily recognize her name. The cool part is you might recognize her face. So I'm thrilled to welcome Jessica to Advanced TV Herstory to talk a bit about her international TV career and a series that was just released in April that she co-starred in, and it's called The Secrets She Keeps. So Jessica, thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me. What a lovely introduction.
Well, you know, most of us can say that we're grateful for streaming. What have you been watching lately?
Oh gosh, what haven't I been watching? I think I've watched as much as is available in the UK. I'm currently, actually last night I just finished probably my favourite series of this year, possibly last, called the BBC HBO series called I May Destroy You. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Have not.
Oh, I mean, you must immediately find I May Destroy You and watch it. Oh, it's incredible television, incredible storytelling. They're, I think, half-hour episodes, and there's 10 of them, which you will, get through very, very quickly. But it's such incredible storytelling, and will sort of rip your heart open and make, it's so honest and it feels so familiar. And they're just sort of, Michaela is a powerhouse. So that would be my top hit.
All right. Well, what I will do for you then is when this episode concludes, back at the very end and in the show notes, I will include the links, or at least the update as of July about that series that Jessica has absolutely endorsed.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Because you are a relative newcomer to American audiences as a lead, but you certainly have experience, and we've seen you in Dracula and The Crown and Deadline Gallipoli. Tell us a little bit about your path to acting, because everyone has a different story, and this is your chance to share it.
Yeah, I'm from Western Australia, and I studied in WA, so I have a degree from Curtin University there, so a performance studies major. Went to university and sort of dabbled in short films and a little bit of TV sort of before going to university, and then a little bit throughout. And then when I graduated, I moved to Sydney and was fortunate enough to sort of start working in television pretty much straight away, but nothing sort of major, just bits here and there. And then I think maybe a couple of years after being in Sydney, I decided to go to LA with a couple of my friends had already sort of done it. And it's very much a rite of passage, I think, for Australian actors to pass through LA to, give it a crack. I think about 3 or 4 weeks into being in LA, I got a role on Arrow, a CW show. And then from there, it just sort of took off. So from there, I did Dracula. So yeah, was a lead in Dracula, and then came back to Australia and worked a little bit here and did some films, and then I ended up back in LA and did a series called Underground, which is a pretty incredible series. We did 2 seasons of that. Yes, and I've just sort of been flying and traveling between the UK and Australia and the States to work on different things, which is an incredible luxury, and I feel very lucky to be able to work across those different continents. And it's such different work as well, depending on where you are and the kinds of stories they're telling. So yeah, I've been very lucky.
And you have had a range of storytelling opportunities, but they all seem to be in drama. Do you have a comedic side that we just haven't had a chance to see yet?
I think comedy to me is I think even more difficult. I think to get comedy right and to be very good at it is such an incredible skill. I mean, I've done a little bit of comedy in Australia, but it's usually playing the straight guy, so that, I'm not the funny one thus far.
Well, you have definitely planted a flag in the historical and the fantasy dramas that we've seen you in. But those roles, it feels to me, are a little bit of a different mindset than the character that you bring forward in The Secrets She Keeps, which is sort of described as a present-day psychological thriller. Listeners, here's how the plot description you would see in any promotional material about this series, which is currently showing on Sundance Now, or is about to be showing on Sundance Now and through the BBC, and it's about to explode, and it's very well regarded. It's that two women from different walks of life find that they have explosive secrets in common and fight to conceal the truth as their worlds are set to collide. And it is a psychological thriller, and if you are a young to middle-aged woman, it's you hang on every scene. Jessica, how did you walk into that role with that sort of modern day mindset?
You're right. I do tend to do, or have tended to done in the past, quite a lot of fantasy and historical dramas, which I love because you walk in and the whole world is created. It's not just you as the actor sort of creating, it's a whole world built around you. So it's such an incredible way to work. Whereas obviously a contemporary drama, it's a lot like the world that we live in a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. Of course, Secrets She Keeps that's certainly not my world. I don't live like Megan, but I think it's a really interesting show. It's a psychological sort of thriller, but it's also a domestic noir. So it's very sort of rich, and the characters, they've all got secrets, as the title suggests. But there's definitely obviously this is based on a book, Michael Rowbotham's novel, but certainly different to historical dramas in that, there's a weight of responsibility to a historical drama, like something like Underground, which is a series that I did. It's a story of a hugely important, horrific time in American history, and that requires a huge amount of trust in the creatives to do it justice to not only the fictional characters, but the historical figures. And it's like Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, who were these incredible heroes and civil rights activists who gave their whole lives to fighting for justice. So it's, playing a part in something like that is very, very different to something like Secrets, which is initially based on Michael Rowbotham, based his novel on an actual event, but everything is fictionalized. So there's a freedom and a playfulness, without, a responsibility, I guess, to the historical context of the story.
I agree. I feel as though it just required more of your facial expressions. It felt like it just required a higher level of physical command of the character, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, certainly in that she's a heavily pregnant woman, which I have not yet been.
Yes, whether you've ever been pregnant or not, the idea of the role of hormones, and without divulging any of the plot, the fact that there's a psychological intrigue around how women feel about being pregnant, wanting to be pregnant, yes. A sense of desperation and what that, and also protectiveness of family and things. And so as it ended, I was like, I don't know. And I feel like this only could have come out of Australia because the entire American hospital system is structured very differently. And we've sort of passed through this part of drama, but that doesn't mean that it still isn't valid, and also inviting to think that there's a place in the world that is not nearly as locked down and suspicious of people as American hospitals are.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. You're right, that the healthcare system and the hospital system in America is so different to Australia and in the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. That's very, very true.
And it's mostly been in the last 20 years. So this particular plot could have easily been, and probably was, a made-for-TV movie 30 years ago. But
Yeah, right.
listeners, I will only say that Jessica and Laura Carmichael do these two roles incredible justice, and they deliver. So that's just the most cool part. What I will ask, though,
Oh, thank
Jessica,
you. That's very
is,
kind.
so when you saw this opportunity and you read for it, or however it is that you got it, what did you find appealing about it? Because it wasn't out of your historical and your fantasy drama sort of line.
For me, I sort of always start with a script, I guess. And if the scripts are, thoughtful or thought-provoking, or the characters are really interesting to me, then that's sort of the first thing that I will engage with. And this one is, I would say, much more female than most of the other sort of shows that I've been on. It's about two women, two central female characters, and it's directed by women, produced by a powerhouse of a woman. Most of our department heads were women, which is an incredible thing. So the idea of going on this emotional journey and this character arc with these characters and with female directors and the production team behind it, it was just sort of too good to pass up. I knew that it would be a very fun thing to make, but I also thought it would be a really interesting conversation within it as well about sort of, female psychology and trauma and female experience and the expectations on women and motherhood, all things that I think are worthy of conversation.
As you recognize that opportunity, did that experience being with such a female-centric crew and with so many creatives influencing the final product, was that experience and that work environment, was it different than other projects you've worked on?
I've been on some wonderful sets and beautifully supportive, creative sets that have had, men as well as women, as at the helm. But I think this story, as well as, other stories, there are certain stories that just need to be told by women. And so we had two female directors. We had one of the writers was a woman, the costume designer was a woman, the production designer was a woman. And I think it did make a difference. I think when you're dealing with the subject matter that we are, I felt so incredibly supported the whole way. Not only were the directors sort of there to guide me, but they were invested in it emotionally and physically with me, and their guidance cannot be sort of understated how helpful it was. And as well, a lot of those women are mothers, most of them actually. So Lisa Miga, who's the costume designer, she would tell me what each stage of pregnancy felt like and how it affected posture and energy. And then Jen Lisi, one of the directors, was very concerned with telling the story of sort of what a cesarean, the cost of a cesarean, what that does to your physicality and your movement, how it limits your movement, and in turn sort of the frustration that Megan would have felt given what happens, which I can't give away, but the frustrations that she felt and the limitations after having a cesarean, that she literally can't walk properly or lift her children, and the emotional toll of that is immense. The vulnerability and the feelings of inadequacy and helplessness. I think there were so many conversations that we had, not only beforehand but constantly on set, about what something means, what it means in the context of being a woman, what it means in the context of being a new mother, all of these things, that it was just invaluable to have this community of women feeding me with information the whole way through.
Having seen all 6 episodes and watching them every single day, I would just watch one and digest it, and it, binge, I suppose. I felt that the story, the content, and the level of detail was very layered. It really felt like there was just a sense of authenticity to it that sometimes, I think, particularly around pregnancy issues, women just do a much better job of telling that story, and they want to get it right because they should get it right.
Yeah, and as well because I think our audience on this will be a very female audience. I think, the conversations and sort of the tone and the look of it feels like a very female story. And so you want women watching it to feel like they are, seeing something of their experience or their identity and what we're saying or asking about sort of social expectations on women, of women. If people can see that and question it, and that's a wonderful thing. And I think, yeah, I think that that's a lot to do with the women who led this production.
Again, I will just say very well done. And it really speaks to what I feel and have sensed during 4 months of not nearly being out as much as I had been in the past, getting to slow down and see some of these series have come from England and Australia and Norway and other countries, but primarily I would say the Northern European countries, and then of course Australia. This is such an opportunity to see so many series with strong lead women characters, with a pair of female characters. It's just so exciting. My question is, I guess, from the time that you started your career, which has blossomed due to so much different opportunity available, not just out of United States productions, but everywhere, what does it feel like to you? How have your expectations and your experiences changed?
Oh, I mean, it's a different world. I have a very different experience and access to work and stories that I ever did to start with. And I guess part of that's probably age. Like, I think to start with, I was often the romantic, naive ingenue, that was limited in that respect. And I'm certainly not naive to the world anymore, so cannot play that. Those days are done. But also, I think there has been a drastic shift. I mean, not far enough yet, but in terms of diversity on, at all levels of production. And I think we are giving voice to different people, and that is essential to creating different worlds and characters in it. Like, I've worked with, and as I was saying before, I've worked with some lovely male directors who are very generous and have a real sense of humanity, and I adore them. But if you have women in the writer's room, if you have female producers creating these narratives, then you're going to have a different kind of role. I certainly have had very different experiences of characters in terms of the way that everything, the way they're created, the way they're written, the depth, the complexity. You see the product of that kind of diversity behind the scenes. And I think the more we push for gender equality and diversity generally in our storytelling, then the richer and more honest and affecting and inclusive those stories become, instead of the same voices and experiences and male gaze, I guess, that has dominated, but particularly Hollywood, for as long as we can remember. I think we're starting to realize that having diverse voices and cultures and faces on screens, that's what really shapes us as a society, as a collective. And I think that that's what truly affects us. We're sort of slowly starting to see the outcomes of that in what we're watching.
So my question, though, is you just left it with the notion that there is progress being made, and we're seeing a very subtle but consistent shift in how a diverse creative team and photography and the writing, all of it influences what we have. Would you say that then, from the scripts and the opportunities you've seen and those that are being obtained by your network of colleagues, that Europe and Australia, that they are a little ahead of the pack with regard to that sort of progress? Or do you feel that Hollywood and the US is on par with that level of representation, inclusion?
Yeah, I think it's a sort of a complicated question in a way, because I would say from my experience, I think in very recent times, Australia and the UK, like, you can see this momentum and you can see this shift that is it feels like a massive thing, and it's happening very quickly, but at the same time we're not there yet. We've got so far to go, because diversity in the writer's room is wonderful, but you've also got to have diversity on the boards, boards of networks and boards of studios and boards of institution, and that's the way that it has to be at sort of every level, certainly in the choosing of the narratives and the sort of final creative say, I think. As for America, I mean, I think it's all moving in the right direction, but it certainly feels like it needs to go deeper. Like, it's more than ticking boxes to be politically, on the right side of history. It really needs to be the next level of equity and inclusion to properly change the way that we tell stories.
I absolutely agree. Actually, just yesterday, I was doing an interview. I interviewed Margaret Cho, who is a very talented Asian American comedian, and she's actually been a public figure in the US for more than 25 years. 25 years ago, she was the title character in All American Girl, and it was a very, it was a series that it was a sitcom, never quite caught its story. It sort of had to change so quickly in order to try to stay ahead of getting canceled, and then ultimately it did get canceled. Margaret's point, even yesterday, was that even with regard to diversity and listening to everybody who has a piece in storytelling, that it certainly is an ethnic diversity, it's the LGBTQIA community, it's the disabled community, it's the fact that that real rich storytelling needs to be done with some of those people at the table so that it's appropriately rich. And another point that was brought forward was that, the network of the professional network is still very white and it's very male oriented. And that influences decisions. And so the greater we have with the diverse agent community and manager community and all of that,
absolutely,
will bring that difference. So
I don't know if you saw what as something that's sort of the UK I saw happening here is the BBC have just announced that they're implementing a minimum 20% off-screen talent target for underrepresented groups, as well as so off-screen. So we're not just talking about on-screen targets, but off-screen, so behind the scenes. As well as that, diverse stories on screen, diverse production teams, and diverse-led production companies. They've made a commitment, sort of a minimum requirement, which is something in the right direction, that they're addressing that it's not just about having people on screen, it's at every level that we need to be genuinely inclusive and genuinely have sort of equality across the board.
I absolutely agree with that, with the idea that the goal should not just simply be to hit that metric, but rather the goal or the fringe benefit from this is going to be most likely a much more financially successful product, whether it's a TV series or a film, because more people are seeing themselves in that production. And
absolutely, and I mean, as a kid, you want to see other people who look and sound and feel like you do, and I think that also, it's such an important thing because it gives the space for tolerance and acceptance and really sort of seeing and understanding one another outside of the cinema, looking around at the wider world and having a respect and understanding for one another because we're seeing it reflected back to us, through our screens.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And maybe then after all of that, we are a more peaceful world and a more caring place to live.
That's the hope.
Well, Jessica, this has been great of you to spend a little bit of your late afternoon with us.
It's my pleasure. It's been such a lovely chat.
Here at Advanced TV Herstory, you've probably got at least a few things that are sitting on your desk. Are there any projects or other things that you do with your creative time when you're not involved in series or preparing for series?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yes, in terms of what's coming next, I'm, hoping to get back to work not too far in the future in the UK, which will be lovely. But what do I do creatively when I'm not working? That's a very good question. I mean, I've been pretty busy of late until quarantine, until lockdown. I've just been sort of reading as much as I can and watching things. And is gardening creative? Can you call gardening creative?
Absolutely, it's feeding your soul.
Okay, I've been gardening a lot, and that, you're right, it has been feeding my soul. It gives me an immense sense of calm and satisfaction.
Yes, and growing things and that.
Yes,
and
I have a whole, it's sort of an edible garden now. I have like all the herbs you could possibly imagine, and a lemon tree and a crabapple tree. So everything, that goes on in the dinner can be sourced from my garden now, which is so satisfying.
And that will end as soon as you go back to work and the crazy schedule.
Yeah, the mint will wilt in a matter of days.
Wilted mint. Wow, that's a practice phrase. Well, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of you in the future, and I think that American viewing habits have changed. And the fact that the streaming systems of the world, the services, are going to be able to track, what our preferences are. I think that's going to be the guiding data that influences a lot of the change that we've discussed here. So I appreciate
isn't it so interesting? the way that it's shifting and all of that tracking. It's very interesting.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Jessica, for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
I'll admit it, I love listening to an accent. Follow Jessica's career by following her on Instagram. Her handle is JDG, JAYDEGEE, or just type in Jessica de Gouw, DEGOUW. Check out The Secrets She Keeps, the series, on Sundance Now, streaming in the US, or BBC One in the UK. The Secrets She Keeps is based on a novel of the same name by Michael Robotham. Check out all your apps to find other series Jessica mentioned that she's been a part of. 2013-2014's Dracula, 2016's Underground, and last year's series The Hunting. Earlier in the chat, Jessica mentioned that she had just completed and loved watching the series I May Destroy You. Find it on HBO. It's going to the top of my list. Many thanks to Lauren Wynn of Sundance Now for helping set this interview up, and to Catherine Yang for all her attention to detail on the editing process. Music you hear on this episode is Jazzer's Take Me Higher, and it's found at freemusicarchive.org. This spring and summer of COVID has kept us busy, so stop by tvherstory.com and browse the archives of more than 120 shows, more than a few of which have been posted just since lockdown. And while you're at our website, sign up for the monthly e-newsletter, which is where all the inside news gets delivered. Listeners, we're all in this struggle together, this thing called life. I'm hopeful you found inspiration and camaraderie in Jessica de Gouw's voice. It's been fun bringing her to your ears. Thanks for listening and for recommending Advanced TV Herstory to your friends who listen to podcasts. And I do appreciate your tenacity inviting those who don't currently listen to just press play. TV lovers have their home right here. And your Why I Podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abel.